The other side of the road is safe, where we sidestep being bothered and avoid getting involved. But rolling up your sleeves and boldly going where few dare to tread, that's walking through Samaria. Each week on our podcast, we introduce you to the special few who walk in the spirit of the Good Samaritan. On behalf of the Giving Company and your hosts, David Hendrickson and Dan Riveros, welcome to the Walking Through Samaria podcast.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Walking Through Samaria podcast. This is your co-host, David Hendrickson, with my other co-host,
Dan Riveros.
And we are super excited to be back again this week, talking with another Good Samaritan. Dan, we're in person.
We are. I love it. Yeah. I'm not taking this for granted ever. Again.
You know what? That's right. That's right. We're learning.
It's the best.
So my mask is hanging off my ear because I'm sipping coffee, and coffee is going to be kind of one of the themes of today's podcast, Dan, which makes it exciting.
We have Kitti Murray with us.
Hey, Kitti, welcome.
Hey, guys.
Good to have you. She's also here in person, not over Zoom or Teams or any of those other
Skype, whatever
social platforms that they call them.
Taking
Skype.
my
That's
life
right.
in my own hands.
That's right. Yeah. Well, Kitti, it is great to have you, and this is going to be fun because we're going to be combining Clarkston, Georgia, with coffee, with maybe a little bit of hot chicken. I mean, this is going to be the essence, right, of podcasting right here. We're going to cover all the good topics. Kitti, if you don't mind, I'm going to read a short bio of you to our listeners.
And then I'll correct it if any of it's wrong.
That's
How about
right.
that?
All right. That's probably, sometimes I get it not 100%
it's not you,
perfect,
but sometimes people get it from other sources. Not that there are that many out there, but there are some wrong ones.
All right, here we go. Dan, you ready?
Yep.
Kitti Murray is a teller of stories, the founder and CEO of Refuge Coffee Company, voracious reader, slow distance runner. We have that in common as well, Kitti. 38-year veteran ministry wife. That's going to be fun to talk about. She and her wise husband, Bill, they are known as Kiki and Chief to their growing tribe of adorable grandkids, live on the ragged edges of Atlanta in a refugee community that CNN has called the most diverse square mile in the world. This is in Georgia, everybody. Just want you to know, the Ellis Island of the South, Clarkston, Georgia, has been called. This has been the most intense and inviting neighborhood in their known world for sure, and it has taught them to dream big and love even bigger. Kitti is an author, an artist, and inspiration to all those who think that they can't start something new after becoming an empty nester and retiree. How's that? Anything to correct?
Good, yeah. I will say
I'm an empty nester as well, so
it's the best, isn't it?
I'm gonna
free bird. That's what you are. That's what I like calling it. We're free birds.
Free bird.
Yeah.
There it is.
And I don't know that we ever really retired.
Yeah.
That has not ever happened in our life yet, and I'm fine with it. But and we've been married now 42 years. So wherever that came from, it was 4 years ago. Yeah.
That's good.
Chief is a nickname?
Yeah, it's just, it's his granddad name.
You're never going to retire with a name like Chief.
Oh, I know.
That's a pretty good granddad name.
Isn't it
that's
awesome?
Solid.
And we all call him that now. Like that's just his name.
That's good.
Yeah, it's good.
I think I'm going to be Pops.
Pops
You
as
don't
a
get
granddad.
to pick. You know that, right?
Yeah. The first grandchild picks, right?
Or your kids do. Because I wanted a certain name and I didn't get it.
You didn't get it?
Which is fine. I'm happy
You're
now.
okay with Kiki?
Oh, I'm
okay.
totally happy. But that was my daughters-in-law, and I embrace it.
How many grandkids?
9.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And we have 4 sons and 9 grandchildren, and 7 of those are girls. Wow. So it is a new experience.
All those men dealing with all that estrogen, long lines to the bathroom.
It doesn't freak me out, though. It does not freak me out, the thought of having a daughter. I got some buddies who are like, no way, want boys. It's the end of the world if I have a daughter. Not me.
Do you know, we have they're pretty masculine sons. Like our oldest is a stunt man.
Yeah.
Or the next one diffuses bombs for the Air Force. The third, I mean, they're all pretty. And they all have girls, and I
that's
love
awesome.
it. I love watching it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
They're very tender, but they're still tough.
So mine's a little bit opposite. we had a girl first. So my daughter, Caroline, is 22. She is a skydiver. She's flying planes. Like she's sort of the adventurous. She did the longest or largest bungee jump in the Southern Hemisphere. I mean, she's way more adventurous than I am.
Yeah, our kids are. And they're better parents than we are. You haven't come to that yet, but our kids are such good parents and their marriages are so good and we're learning from them, even though it's kind of too late for us. But
give us real quick the slow distance runner. How does that fit into your bio?
Well, so that's another thing. And I'm not trying to pull one over on anybody. I was a slow distance runner. I love running. It was cathartic for me. I think God made me to kind of have my wheels turning all the time. And so running was a good way to keep from inflicting that on everybody sometimes. But I am also 63 years old. And so several years ago, my joints quit working with running. Yeah. And so I had a joint replacement. So now I'm actually a Pelotoner. Because I needed
there you
something.
Go. What's that?
It's
the bike.
Spin bike.
Okay.
It's like
all on this video screen and they have
it's super high tech.
Yeah.
And it's super expensive, I have to say. But for us it has been worth it. It replaced you know that endorphin rush that you get from running. When I quit being able to run, I really grieved that and couldn't find anything to replace it. Like I went to Tai Chi class and my husband and I on the way home. No, we were walking home from it.
I don't know if you get endorphins from Tai Chi.
No, he goes, do you hate that as much as I did? Like we both didn't like that. And no offense to Tai Chi, we just couldn't get into it. Tried swimming, tried lots of other things. And the beauty of running is that you can walk out your front door and just do it.
That's right.
So the Peloton,
you can pack your shoes. If you travel, you can throw your shoes in the suitcase.
Well,
that's why
Peloton
I like to run.
doesn't work like that.
Peloton doesn't work.
It has replaced that. Like
That's
whatever
good.
that thing where you just max out.
Yeah.
So joints, I'm assuming, was that knees or is that hip?
But it's actually
my hips are bad. I got bad hips.
Joints.
Really? Already?
I'm only 30.
But you're the young one in this podcast.
I'm a big power lifter. That's kind of like where like my thing came from. And I love lower body. So it's like squatting and lunging constantly. So like when I wake up in the morning, it's like, pop.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's not good.
Yeah.
So Kitti, our listeners are going to want to know who's like your favorite instructor, right? On the Peloton?
Oh yeah. Okay. It depends on the day. Like Tunde is one. She's, I believe she's Nigerian American, and she just I just love her. Alex Toussaint is another.
Okay,
he's like just pushes you hard. But then there's a Cody who's hilarious, and there's like I like mix it up.
That's good.
I love it. Now,
I like all the 30-minute ones. Those are my favorite instructors.
No,
yeah.
and
my wife has a Peloton. She's good at it. Yeah.
So it's like
I'm super competitive. Even now, let me just say, I am very competitive and have been my whole life, but I'm not good at anything. Like I'm not good enough to be like world class anything. So I'm kind of a jack of all trades and master of none. And so, and I kind of don't care, but I'm still competitive. It's a really conflicting thing. So I'm always I just find somebody and try to beat them on the leaderboard.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
So anyway.
Well, I think we're going to put you in the master category of Good Samaritan. So let's hold that for a little bit here. Now let's walk all the way back. So we're going to twist this right at the beginning because Kitti's bio says 38-year veteran ministry wife. And I think it's popular to say today kind of on social media that somebody who's been a veteran of ministry for 4 decades, probably longer than that, right? Because this bio's 4 years old, maybe. That you wouldn't be as involved in something like Refuge Coffee Company in Clarkston, Georgia. Like that doesn't fit the narrative. That doesn't fit the stereotype that, gosh, 4 decades in ministry. And we're going to ask what your husband does so that we can unpack that. But you're doing great work right now at Refuge Coffee Company, which we're going to talk about. So, but let's walk all the way back, if you don't mind. You were born in St. Simons Island, Georgia.
Yes.
Which, Dan, there's a connection to the Georgia Bulldogs. All right, you want to hear it?
If there's a connection, he'll find it.
Watch out.
St. Simon's Island.
I went to Agnes Scott, so I'm a Tech fan.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Sam Collier's. We had Sam Collier on the show last week, and his sister went to Tech. But St. Simon's is where all the Georgia fans stay for the Georgia-Florida game every year. So it's like an hour from Jacksonville. It's a few hours from Athens, and so that's the hangout spot. That's
did not know
claim to
that.
fame for St. Simon's Island, Georgia. Yeah.
How many of those have you been to?
Do you ever 0?
You've never been to one?
Never been to the Jacksonville game. I've been to Oodles, right, of Georgia Bulldog games. But
How have you never been to that?
Because it's a little over my head from a celebratory. You know,
it's
they
just real
used to
rowdy?
call it the world's largest outdoor cocktail party.
Okay.
Oh, I believe that.
So,
yeah.
which I don't think you can call it that anymore. I'm not sure why, but anyway, hopefully I haven't offended anybody. But
Well, as just like the Bulldog guy, I know you to me.
I will go
Yeah,
at some point.
you need to
I
go.
will absolutely go.
We'll take the podcast on
yeah.
there. We'll do a whole show live. We got to
Find
find
an
some
angle.
good places.
You can find an angle somewhere.
Let's stay with Kitti. We're good.
Yeah.
But you didn't stay there long. Just tell us a little bit about your life growing up, and then kind of you and Bill, and
Oh gosh.
let's hit it right away.
All right, I'm going to hit some high points. So, yeah, I grew up in Nashville, though, Tennessee, the very central buckle of the Bible Belt. My grandfather was the editor of Home Life magazine.
Wow.
So my siblings and I were all on the cover many times of Home Life magazine. So we were like Baptist
Well,
celebrities.
there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had an encounter, I'm just going to say it like this, with Jesus when I was a teenager. And when faith and following him and loving his word all was mine and new to me. And so, of course, and this is the 70s, I had a things go better with Jesus patch on my jeans, because that was
There you go.
what you did then. And so I think my heritage in kind of a more traditional background, I didn't reject it, but I didn't have a lot of respect for it because I was young and thought what I was doing was better and all of that stuff. And now I look back and just see the threads of, of just God's grace and all of that. But anyway, so then I went away to college and prayed about where to go, went to Agnes Scott. It icks me up now. My parents were scared I would marry a Presbyterian.
Oh, gosh.
Which is just funny
That
because
would be
Agnes Scott,
awful.
well, I know, it wasn't even really a Presbyterian college, but it had those roots. So anyway, I was convinced that, this just give you a little flavor. I was convinced that I studied German and English and wanted to be a writer, but I also wanted to go smuggle Bibles into East Germany. Like that was kind of my,
There you go.
and I decided I would never marry, or if I did, I would wait till I was in my mid-30s, and that scared my parents. I think I specialized in scaring my parents, but while still also not really being bad, just pushing against things a lot. But then I met my husband, and he just ruined everything because I fell in love with him and wanted to never be away from him. And he was going to seminary to be a Baptist pastor.
There you go.
And he always goes, I never wanted to be he goes, I never wanted,
preacher's wife?
yeah. And he goes, I never wanted a Baptist preacher's wife, but he got one. And so that was us. It's interesting though.
Where did he go to seminary?
Southwestern.
Okay.
And my senior year in college, and this is important to the story, I think, and so he had graduated, had already planned to wait a year to go off to school. So my senior year of college, we were engaged that whole time. And he was diagnosed with cancer and went through cancer treatment all during our engagement. And we always say we started our marriage with this really keen awareness that tomorrow is not guaranteed, which is a good way to do marriage. Like it really is. So I think there was this immediate understanding that, we just lived at the grace and mercy of God. And I remember Bill praying one day about all of it and saying, Lord, this is ruining my life, and God said to him real clearly, I've given you everything. What else do I owe you? And that kind of settled knowledge really landed with him and has been real formed him in a lot of ways. So anyway, and we went to seminary, and then I won't go through all the things that we've done. Bill was on staff at a church, and it's funny, the first church he was on staff at was here in Atlanta. It was a huge, traditional, very affluent Baptist church.
We have a few of those in the greater Atlanta area.
But I look back on even that little time, and we were, huge affluent church with crazy expensive cars in the parking lot. We didn't have money though, and we had our second child while we were there. And, but the pastor was a really strong advocate for the poor, and would preach a lot about that. Yeah. And so it hit both of us. And even back then, I remember really clearly thinking, if I don't change my traffic pattern, my week in and week out traffic pattern, I will never meet someone who is, I'm doing air quotes, poor. I won't even be in touch with people who are, I'm incredibly needy, but needy in a certain way, And so, and I won't go into what happened then, but I really had to act on that. I couldn't let that slide. And so there were some changes. And then we left there and have done lots of other things. And Bill was a senior pastor at three different churches. And then eventually, fast forward decades, and our kids are growing up. And eventually my husband said, I don't think the senior pastor role fits me. And it really doesn't. Leading an organization, that's just not him. He's a shepherd and he's inspiring, and he's a shepherd, but he's not an organizational leader. And he said, what this feels like is David wearing Saul's armor. It's just heavy. And so he made a decision, and it was a long process, and it wasn't without conflict, or not necessarily between us. I was feeling that too. So we ended up leaving formal ministry, and then Bill went to work for a nonprofit called Apartment Life. Have you heard of it? It's a really great concept where they put teams of 2 people in apartment communities. They work with management in order to build community. Okay. So we became one of those teams, but then he also began to work for them. And we were doing that prior to moving to Clarkston, and I can tell you how we got to Clarkston. By that time I had started writing, so I was writing pretty much full time. Okay. Our kids that was when we became empty nesters. But what we discovered, we talked about this a lot lately. I think living in Clarkston and then starting Refuge has been so kind of all-consuming in a great way that we forget this little interlude we had where we were just the partiers in the apartments. We threw the parties. Pool parties and breakfasts and stuff to engage our community. And it was like that apartment community became our parish almost, and our friends. And for the first time, I don't think I realized how much the Christian bubble had presented a lens through which I saw the world that was not exactly accurate. Yeah. I wasn't seeing people the way God was seeing them. I was seeing them the way Christian culture sees them and the way the church sees them. So it was almost like a love affair. We began to fall in love with people who by no means were Christians, but who were amazing, kind of like Samaritans. They were amazing people who sometimes I'd look at them and say, so-and-so is definitely not a believer, and they make moral choices that I wouldn't agree with, but they're kinder than I am, or they're more generous than I am. And so I guess you would call that the just common grace, but that doctrine of common grace that God gives the ability to live a flourishing life to everybody. And so there are people out there that I used to really believe that, well, Christians are the only people who can do marriage well. Well, the statistics tell us that's not true, right? Yep. Or Christians are the only people who have real joy. Well, that's not true either, because God's given us that in our DNA, and He rains and shines the sun on all of our crops. And so it doesn't in any way diminish the the fact that Jesus is the Lord of the universe, not at all. But it gives me this totally different way of seeing and approaching and having friendships.
Yeah.
And so I think that happened before we even moved to Clarkston. And so the diversity that was in the apartments we were in was not economic, and it wasn't ethnic, and it wasn't anything else. It was just that diversity.
Yeah.
And we needed to learn that.
Such a beautiful picture of Jesus's ministry as well, and his willingness to engage with all kinds of people and give that message. And for some reason, and I don't want to sound, I worry about this sometimes in Dan and I's conversations, I don't want to sound overly critical of the church, the big C, because I do think the church is doing great work in lots of different areas, particularly on a global scale. But I like your term, the Christian bubble. You can get an inaccurate portrayal of the kingdom and of service to Christ and being the hands and feet of Christ by sort of narrowing your choices, right?
Well, it starts with us and them instead of all of us.
Yeah.
And so here's an example I love to share. I started a running club because I love to run, and we would run the Publix Marathon downtown, together. But I started this running club, and I remember the first, I'm slow, but I keep going, so eventually people wear out and I feel like I'm doing better. But anyway, we built so many great friendships. So the first year we ran it, a couple of neighbors from the apartments and I, the entire way in our pace group, there was a huge group of people in bright yellow shirts from a church that said, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me," which I don't really think that's what that verse is about. And they were following. And I thought, that's an interesting mission model that I've bought into my whole life. If we just do happy, fun things together and we do it around non-Christians, they'll all go, "Ooh, I want to be in that club."
Yeah.
It's not really true. And so rather than saying, "Hey, I want to come do a happy, fun thing with you. I want to do what God has gifted me to do, but I want to do it. I want to free up some of my life from church," which churches, again, love church, but sometimes it sucks all of our creativity and fun and abilities for itself rather than for the world. And if I can say, "Hey, I'm going to take something I've been giving to the church and I'm going to spread it out here some," it just feels so much more authentic and it's more effective just to love people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's good.
that is good.
So part of the paradox a little bit in this conversation, I've gradually learned a little bit more about Clarkston. Passion City Church, I think, does some things with Clarkston, and there's a number of giving company employees that go to Passion, and we've been to the Passion conference a number of times. But it's fun to say that in Georgia, I love how you described Nashville as the belt buckle of the Bible Belt, or the buckle of the Bible Belt, maybe you said. But in Georgia is what CNN has called the most diverse square mile in the world. I don't know if that's true or not, but 13,000 people, probably more than that now, 54 nationalities. It's been called the Ellis Island of the South. I mean, let's talk about Clarkston a little bit. How did you get there? And give us a bit of flavor of what the vibe of Clarkston is.
I love to talk about Clarkston. And before I do, I want to tell you how we got there because I think it's and it's a little bit of an homage to my husband. But so we were living in these apartments. Bill continued to work for Apartment Life after we moved out. But the commitment to be a CARES team is what they call them, is a 2-year commitment. And one of the reasons for that is it's pretty intense. Like you just become the go-to person in the community if you do the job well. And so, but we were loving it. But we could see burnout on the horizon,
For
and
sure.
We've been doing it about 2.5 years. And we also realized, we should probably buy a house again. And at that time we had 1 grandchild or 2 by the time we left. And we knew we would have more. We didn't know how many more, but, and, probably not done. But, so we had begun the conversation around, hey, we should start looking for a house. And we weren't we weren't rushed. Well, Bill was studying to teach a class on biblical social justice, and he was digging into scripture and all kinds of things. And then he said, one night we were having dinner, and he said, Kitti, there's just something in the Bible that's been disturbing me. Well, he has a PhD in theology, and he's loved the Bible his whole
from
adult
Southwestern
life.
Seminary,
Yes.
right? Dallas, Texas.
Well, that's not where his PhD is from, but that's where the master's is from. But anyway, yes, he's a poster child in some ways. But he was like, there's just something bothering me, and And the other thing that made me listen probably even more is he's just not ever bothered. Like, he is the calmest. He's
even keel.
If you know the Enneagram, he's a 9. He's like just even. And so I was like, okay, you're bothered. Oh,
Me
you
too. I'm a 9.
We need to talk. Yeah,
I'm not a 9.
We'll talk. We'll go.
Yeah,
we could
we'll
go
deal
on
with
that
that
rabbit
later.
trail forever. Yeah. But anyway, he said, there's something that bothers me. And I said, what is it? And he goes, well, I mean, we've both known this. The Bible talks about widows, aliens, and orphans.
Yep.
And he said it's over 200 times. It's in the scriptures. And he said, so what bothers me is, why don't we have any friends that fit that description? And I was like, well, yes, we do. You know, I was really defensive, and we did projects, and we gave money, and we, not a ton, but we, had been on mission trips. So I was like, and I always laugh. We say we're more woke than most people our age. So, just back up, And he said, no, that's not the same thing. He's obviously not intimidated by me. And he's like, we don't have friendships that with people who are not only different from us, but who are in this category that is clearly so important to God. And so we both decided that night, after I got over myself, that that's where we would buy our house. Like, we would find somewhere, and we didn't feel like we were supposed to leave Atlanta. We love Atlanta. And
Yeah.
feel really called to be in this city. And
Is Clarkston still the last stop on that train line? That was sort of how people had described, like, one of the reasons Clarkston became a settlement area was one of the train lines that goes through downtown Atlanta. Like, you had access.
Oh,
like,
I don't
anyway.
know the answer to that
Yeah.
question. Yeah, I don't know.
Makes sense.
We're less than half a mile outside of 285, which people are always like, wait, what? Because they picture that it's this far away.
Yeah, right.
Like,
Yeah.
little
Right.
city, and it's a suburb. It's not even really suburban. Anyway. So we made this. I remember we prayed about it that night. We're like, well, where is that? And as the landscape of the city's changing, where we were living, which was the old Fourth Ward, was not that anymore. And so we were just not sure where we were supposed to go. And I think we've just done life long enough to know, God, if you're leading us, you'll show us, and we'll keep our eyes open. And of course we'll strategize, but we don't have to lose sleep tonight over it. Well, a week later, I went out to lunch with a friend who is a good friend, but at that time our orbits didn't overlap. So we had to make time, and I hadn't seen her in about 6 months. And I knew she and her husband were looking to buy a house in Clarkston, not to live there, but to let their church use it as a kind of a mission base. And that was when, real estate was really cheap. And so I knew they were thinking about it. And I knew about Clarkston. I don't know why. Like, we had helped with a family with World Relief there.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't on our radar at all. And so I asked my friend Karen, I said, hey, did you guys buy that blue house? And she said, oh, that fell through, but we bought a neighborhood instead, which is hilarious. And they bought a neighborhood with 17 lots, all empty except for 3. And when the builder went under, the 3 houses were about 80% finished. And she was just joking because she didn't know about our conversation.
Yeah.
She goes, you want to buy one of our houses? And I went, I think we do.
Oh, my gosh.
And of course, it's a lot of up and down because if you buying a house is always that way. But we ended up 6 months later moving into one of those houses, and that's where we are. And it's wonderful, and we love the house, and we love the neighborhood, and it's amazing. So that's how we ended up there.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
So before we talk more about Clarkston, you brought up scripture.
Yes.
That your husband said had kind of shaken him a little bit. This came across my Twitter feed. Not that I was not working this morning, Dan, and checking Twitter.
Sweet.
Just don't want you to, let the troops know that maybe I was on Twitter during work hours. But Deuteronomy 24:14 says, "Don't take advantage of poor, needy workers, whether they are fellow Israelites or immigrants who live in your land or your cities." There's such great examples. We've had Matthew Sorens from World Relief on this podcast, Chris Pulaski from Bethany Christian Services on this podcast. We've got Kitti Murray on this podcast. Like, we should be shaken, right? Like, we should be spurred to action when we read scripture like this. Is it happening more than we think, or do we need to be shaking more Christians? Like, you need to be reading all of scripture and abiding by what it says.
I think we need to be shaking more Christians, but I also think it's happening more than we think.
Yeah.
I think, in fact, this is an interesting little story, a little side note, but 2 weeks ago, have a friend who is Jewish and an immigration attorney in another state, but she was in town and she just stopped by Refuge, and we were actually doing something on Zoom later in the week, and she stopped by to, we had coffee together. Well, there was a couple there that I met because often our staff will bring people over. They're like, "I just met this person. I want you to meet them." That's sort of the whole vibe of Refuge. Like, you can't do this there very easily because you get interrupted and there's lots of, you just need to meet this person. And so, but it was a couple that said, and so I asked them who they were, and my friend was sitting there and they said, "Oh, we have a sports ministry and we use soccer and other sports to share the gospel." Well, a little of my evangelical something was triggered in that, like, "Oh, don't say it like that." That's what I felt. It was funny, but because I could have said that, but it just felt, it's that thing of, let's don't do any bait and switch. Let's don't use anything. Like, the gospel is about restoring the whole world, and yes, there's sharing Jesus with people, but sometimes we do that in a really coercive, agenda-driven way. And so I had that reaction. Well, it's funny. They walked away. They were delightful, and we had a great conversation, and they walked away, and she looked at me, and she said, she had already said this to me in another way, but she said, "Kitti, the world needs Christians like that and like you to be louder." She said, "They are clearly driven by love, and that's what we all need to hear." And I was like, she wasn't triggered by anything. She saw through she wasn't listening critically. She just saw that they were there and they loved people and they were caring about people and actually doing things to care for people. So I do think, I think, to your point, I think the Christians who are kind of responding to those things in Scripture are often doing so more quietly, which I would applaud. Like, that's really good. Let's maybe not shake people, but let's just, I don't know, vibrate them a little. I don't know. And I don't know, it's that we're in such weird times. So anyway. Yeah, I think that the answer to that question is yes and yes.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
I don't know if that's even
we're going to have to talk about coffee here in a few minutes. Dan's from Colombia.
Yes.
So
we have the best coffee.
Yeah, you do.
So there's going to be, some
Ethiopians might take you up on that. Yeah.
They are good. It was good. Ethiopian coffee is good.
You moved to Clarkston.
Yes.
Give us the vibe of Clarkston.
Yes.
How did you guys experience Clarkston?
Well, thankfully, again, I have to give credit where it's due. My husband he's probably the most skilled question asker. You're doing great, by the way, but he's one of the most skilled listeners and question askers I've ever known. And so that's just so baked into him. And he said to me, don't join anything. Not be a part of some things, but let's don't sign on to do volunteer work with the first people that ask us. Let's be really careful and let's observe and learn first. And I fought back and said, but I don't know. I'm so grateful he said that. And I'm so grateful we did that. So Clarkston is, literally there were some women from Burma who would pick the weeds in our backyard because that's all that was in our backyard for a long time. But they'd be back in our backyard picking the weeds for food. And not because they were hungry, or it's not a food desert there at all. There's so much great food there and access. But because we were growing something that they used regularly. And it always made me think of Ruth and Naomi and of Boaz leaving the margin of his fields. And what does it look like for us to leave more margin for people? But, and there are women that'll walk down the streets with like huge stuff on their head, but there's not one particular culture that's there. There's all these different cultures. So it's really a beautiful thing. Yeah. And we just got to know our neighbors. And back when we moved in 8 years ago, our refugee resettlement program was very robust, and it had not begun to be dismantled like it has been in the last few years. So there were new arrivals all the time. And a lot of Syrians, and a lot from the Congo. The Congo is probably one of the biggest, but also a lot from Nepal.
Tough areas, right? I mean,
it's where the toughest things are happening is where people were coming from. And so we got to know people, and we'd be in their homes, or they would come in our home. And there are a few key people in the community. There's one in particular that I'm not sure I'm at liberty to tell her story right now, but it's probably one of the hardest ones you'll ever hear. And she's from Samaria, and she's a connective tissue. Like she's a Christian, which is why her whole family was killed. Like she is so good at loving people and connecting people. Wow. And so she would call me. Like she called me one day and she goes, "Come to the Department of Labor." And I was like, but I don't know where it is. And she goes, "Well, you can Google it, can't you?" Like she's 80 years old from Somalia, and she's telling me that. But she would connect me with people to do something for them that she couldn't do. And so my original thought was, because when people get here, that first 6 months is horrific. You don't speak the language, have to start paying back your plane ticket in 6 months. Like, don't get much money, and it's, And so my first experience was, this is terrible. People are suffering. It's horrible. I have to do everything I can. And I did. And I'd read Toxic Charity. I'd read When Helping Hurts. I knew all the right ways to do things, but I totally blew past that because just in my, and so that meant we didn't develop relationships that were as healthy. And over time, we began to see that wasn't helping, that people needed us to dive in and really be friends, not to swoop in and fix stuff. But Clarkston is, I love it. It is such a rich mix of people. And it is low income, and it does have a lot of the issues that low income communities have, but it also has, think about it. These are first generation survivors. So there's also kind of this pride in their culture. And so one of the things Refuge, I think, has been able to do well with is highlight and celebrate those cultures.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, like this Friday, or next Friday is Ethiopian New Year. So we're going to do some stuff, even though with COVID we're limited. But
that's good. Yeah. Well, let's talk about coffee. So I'm
not an expert. Just
Refuge Coffee Company is a 501c3, so you're a nonprofit. Yes. Exists to serve the global community in Clarkston through coffee-related job creation, job training, social networking, and commerce. I thought I saw somewhere that you actually help employees take English classes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So talk about what caused you to found Refuge, and tell us what Refuge is up to.
Okay. So, that's such a funny question. And I have so many answers to it. I'll try to make them make sense. But, you can tell from the history I've already shared with you that neither my husband nor I are business people. Like when we first started this, I used to say, if you combined our business acumen, it would be a really low or a high negative number. Like we just don't like, see, I even had to think about that. I have to pinch myself that we've because we are a business. I mean, we're a nonprofit business, but I would say after we had been there maybe a year, these three thoughts began to converge. The first one, totally selfish. I wish there was a coffee shop nearby. I love coffee.
Well, there you go.
Coffee shops.
That'll do it.
Yeah, I was a writer.
I
wanted
coffee,
one.
man.
Yeah, and there were places to get coffee then in Clarkston. Like there was an Ethiopian restaurant, and I would go. But there weren't places.
We should go. For Ethiopian food.
So
for
good.
tips, get some tips.
I wasn't crazy about it.
I love tips.
I wasn't.
I love
the
tips.
Ethiopian didn't. But I think it's what we were getting when we were in Ethiopia. They weren't letting us
Do you like
branch out and
injera?
everything. Injera?
Oh, yeah.
Injera,
That's
the bread.
Oh, yeah, I did like the
Yeah.
bread, yeah.
All of my Ethiopian friends know I love them dearly, but I can't do it.
You can't do
but
it?
Anyway, no.
Really?
There's another kind of bread that's certain Ethiopian cultures.
A little sweeter?
Yes, and I love it. But but it's good.
Sorry, we got off track.
Yes,
I
we
love
did.
Ethiopian food.
I do too. Syrian food's really good. Anyway, so coffee shop. Wanted a coffee shop. I just thought we need one. Second, and these other two are obviously weightier, but the second one was I'm just a natural networker. I didn't know that about myself, but I am. And so when I meet somebody, I immediately think of 3 or 4 people that I want them to know.
That's good.
And it's just a natural thing. Well, I had so fallen in love with our neighbors, and I was like, how can I get people to know people here? Like, it just felt like Clarkston was this hidden gem without doing it in a weird, like, come do a little safari tour of Clarkston. That seemed awful. And so that was rolling around in my mind. Like, could we do this multi-ethnic coffee shop where everybody's from, feels welcome? And so there was that. But then the other thing, and this is the thing that has surprised me that we've had any effectiveness in this area, but the thing we were often praying for our community were for jobs. The chicken processing plants are an hour and a half away. They even recruited in Clarkston. They weren't terrible jobs, but you couldn't learn English. You couldn't be with your family because you commuted an hour and a half, and the pay was okay, but I just felt like there needed to be better and it needed to be closer, so that one thing I think refugees need, and I think people in crisis need, is a little breathing space to decide what to do next. If you've been running or just surviving, there's no luxury to do that. So I thought, if we did a coffee shop, we could provide a few jobs. So those 3 things came together, and I kept thinking, what if we could just do a coffee shop? And it was always kind of this third person or second person language, never very passive, never the thought that I could do it. I just thought it was a great idea that somebody needed to do. And so I would mention it to a few people and, drop the idea, and nobody would take it and run with it. And then we were having a prayer meeting in our home early one morning, and Bill said, Kitti, tell people your idea. And somehow him saying it that way felt a little more personal. And I hadn't really said, I think I hadn't been as personal with it with anybody except him. And I was like, no, it's weird. And it feels fluffy. So back to the Enneagram, I'm a 7. We're kind of fluffy anyway. Nobody takes us seriously. So that's what I felt like. It's just not, it's my weird idea. And so, but I said it, and at that time we had this sectional sofa, and everybody, it was like they all levitated off of the couch, and they were like, this has to happen, And then Bill said to me one day, you're having these conversations, and the common denominator in every conversation is you. So maybe you need to take ownership of this. And I was still it just didn't make any sense. I loved writing. I was still writing a book for somebody right then. I loved the half a day or 3/4 of a day of just contemplation and writing and solitude even. And then the rest of the days for partying and having fun. And it was a great mix. But I always love telling this story as a tipping point. And of course, tipping points are more dramatic in hindsight. But I took my friend Amina, who's my Somalian friend, to Dancing Goats in Decatur. And I took her because she just wears herself out taking care of people. And I was like,
gosh.
she needs a respite.
Yeah.
What better respite than to go to a coffee shop? So we are sitting in Dancing Goats and drinking cappuccinos. And she looks around and she goes, there's never going to be anything like this in Clarkston. And I always tell people, Amina speaks 9 languages and victim is not one of them. Like That's
awesome.
Wow.
She was not like griping.
Yeah.
She was just making this observation. And all of a sudden it hit me that we don't think refugees are worth that. Like that kind of investment. Like it, and low-income communities are that way. You know, the higher end, really well done, restaurants or whatever won't go into those because there's no ROI, there's no return on their investment. And I was like, but this needs to happen.
That's a business term, Kitti. ROI.
I know. Sorry.
I mean, you're there.
No place
you're
for
there.
that here. I know. I never used to know what it meant. I know more than I want to know sometimes now. Anyway, that was like, okay, this is. And then a friend of mine said right after that, this is just funny. I told our kids this. I was like, Dad and I we've invited some friends of ours that have money over for dinner, and I'm going to pitch this idea to them and ask them if they'll seed it. And our kids all went, what? Like, do you have a business plan? Do you know what you're going to do? And I was like, no, but if they can give me some money, we'll get started. And they're like, you are not ready to ask for money. And I wasn't. Like, it was a year later when we started asking for money, but we'd already invited everybody for dinner.
Yeah.
And those people ended up becoming the initial board. They're the ones that said you should do a coffee truck. And I was like, no. Can you see I'm seeing a pattern here as I'm talking that I disagree with things and then eventually have to change my mind all the time. But I wanted a coffee shop, and a coffee truck was it was a way to test the concept and way cheaper than building out a coffee shop. So, and now we have 2 coffee trucks and 3 carts and 2 trailers and we have all the things, and 2 shops. But at that time, that was brilliant. And so we kind of got started. That's how we started.
Wow.
What year was that?
2015, 2014, we did some we did 3 block parties. Okay. Just to kind of see. Yeah. And we did pour overs over propane burners.
Okay.
And just invited people. Well, it's just like, I think that thing of do the next thing really served us well. And so that we wanted to see if people would come and who would come. Is it just all the white people are going to come to this, or will it be the whole community? And those block parties were encouraging.
Yeah. So 5 years after starting this, it sounds like you weren't always sure about trusting your gut or going with your ideas. Have you kind of learned to? Yeah, I've gotten better at it. But I'm also not, we've got a big team now. Okay. I always tell people I've figured out that, I'll always be the founder. That's the beauty of being the founder of something. You never lose that job title. Right. But I'm the founder who knows how to find people. And I do feel like...
Yeah, your networking skills come into play
and
there
we
for
have
sure.
had amazing people. Our COO and president now was in the Chick-fil-A world. So when COVID hit, he was on it. And we were able to keep all our employees.
You're definitely finding people. Just from the origin of the staff, it's you're finding people.
Oh, yeah.
There's Ethiopia, Syria, some from Damascus.
Damascus.
Yeah. You're finding
Sudan,
them.
Yeah.
The DRC,
Sudan and South Sudan.
And South Sudan,
they're like enemies there and they're friends here, which is wonderful.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, it has been it's been a great journey.
Yeah. So I saw a video that NBC Nightly News did on Refuge Coffee
Lester
Company.
Holt.
With Lester Holt. That's exactly right. And in your interview, you said there are so many ways that we make refugees not feel welcome. How does that manifest itself when through your eyes? How do you see us not making them feel welcome?
Gosh. Well, so I would say one of the first things I started to notice was right after we started Refuge and we hired our first Syrian, and who is now our general manager and is brilliant and was a pharmacist in Syria, and now he's in school to get a business degree because he loves what he does and he's so good at it. But and the Paris bombings happened. So that would have been 2015. And I remember just the rhetoric on social media, and the fear I went to a doctor who said, "Why did you move to Clarkston?" And I said something about the refugee community. He goes, "Oh, so you're going to go hang out with all the terrorists?" I mean, he literally said that. And I was like, actually,
Yikes.
These are the people that are fleeing from the terrorists.
Yeah.
This is not there's so much ignorance around this issue here. But I also think it's woven into almost everything we say, kind of a superiority. And I think there's also, and I don't want to throw around these words because some of them are fast becoming buzzwords, but this whole kind of the haves and have-nots and the kind of triumphalism of the haves, if you just work hard, which I agree that working hard is important, and we reward hard work at Refuge and have people who are very proud to work hard. But that idea that that's all it's about. It's not about opportunity. It's not about, trauma. It's not about all those other things. So I know I'm being really vague, but I think, or even, we tried to hire refugees, but they would never be on time, which I get it. I get the value. I mean, that's one of the things we talk about at Refuge, and our...
Well, and I love how you're helping bust through the language barrier, right? Because that could be maybe a bit of a false barrier to engaging with somebody or hiring someone. Yes. And you guys kind of go right at it and say, hey, we can solve this. We'll teach you English.
Well, you know how we teach English almost more than the classroom aspect is every single day that our baristas work for us, they spend 8 hours interacting with people who are buying coffee. And usually people who are kind and wonderful, but we're in, people who, not always, and they have to learn really fast, but they learn in this really natural way. Yeah. Yeah. But I would say that the other thing, I don't even want to get political. It's interesting. Refuge is we're not faith-based and we're not political. And I think, so I want to be careful, but I feel like we have implications in both of those levels. The implications are there politically, not who you should vote for, but what's important. Yeah. And I think our nation was founded by refugees, and then Jesus was a refugee who, anyway. And so, but I think there's this sense of, we're the overcomers and you're the less thans. And again, it's subtle, and it's also not so subtle on social media. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So how long did it take you for you to become aware of that? Was it actually after you started working with refugees and kind of started seeing it? Because growing up, you were exposed to that your whole life. You must have been, but maybe not consciously.
Oh, not consciously. Yeah, it has been an ongoing. Bob Goff has that. What is that saying he has in the beginning of one of his books where he says, "Real faith is murders all earlier versions of itself," something like that. And I was thinking, I feel like that I'm in that constant journey. I might have just totally murdered that that quote, but that idea that the ability to rethink things is so vital. So I think, I know I'm okay to share this story. Our COO they're from North Carolina, small town. They came here, and they didn't live in Clarkston, but they went to Passion City to church one Sunday, met somebody, the couple we bought our house from there, and they went out to lunch, and then they found out about Clarkston. So his wife and 2 children started volunteering. And at that time, we were doing a lot of the storage and work in my garage, which is kind of funny now, but they would also hang out at, whatever. And Walt said, Caroline told me that they were hanging out with Syrians. And I was like, this isn't going to happen, And so, and then he was like, well, I should have an open mind. So we had an event, like an open mic night. And he came. And just that few hours of proximity to people totally changed him. So I think
that'll do it.
For me, it's been gradual, but then there's some moments. And then as I've gotten, I know what our policies do to individuals. We have people who can't get their family here now because of, let's take COVID out of the picture, but we have people who can't get their families here because of the presidential determinations and those sorts of things, and the policy changes that are myriad. So, and not that all policies are bad, but just the thinking has shifted in our country for some reason from we allow people in and we help them based on their vulnerability. To based on what they can do for us, and that shift is really troubling.
Yeah, it's good. So on your website, this is the declaration that I read. Refuge Coffee Company, Clarkston, Georgia. Here we go. We are for welcome. We are for equality. We are for humans, no matter who they are or where they come from. We are for sharing coffee and tea with anyone who walks in our doors. We are for conversations that matter. I love this one. We are for lowering our voices instead of raising them. We are for greeting the stranger with a smile. We are for dancing to all kinds of music. We are for immersive cultural experiences. We are for an outpouring of forgiveness instead of outrage. We are for believing that people can change their minds. We are for the process. Tell me about that last one. We are for the process.
That's actually a really good caveat because it means we can be for you even if you haven't been for all those other things yet. If you're just in process.
Yeah.
So, and that I remember writing that and then getting input from some of our team and it was after Charlottesville.
Yeah.
So that and that sense of these loud voices yelling, "Go home," which let's don't even put politics into that. Let's just put our psyche, as a country, like what on earth is going on, and so to be for people and in that way, we just needed to say that out loud, and on paper.
So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Dan, what's your favorite coffee?
Colombian.
How do you drink it?
Black. I got different coffees. I got my morning coffee and I got an evening coffee.
Is your morning black?
Yeah, my
and
morning.
Your evening is
put a little bit of almond
fancier?
milk, little bit of almond milk in there. In Colombia, you drink tinto.
Almond milk. That's so millennial.
That is super millennial.
That's so millennial.
Not for any health reasons at all.
I wish I liked it.
How come it's not almond
milk.
juice? Why is it almond milk?
I don't know. I don't even know when I started getting it. It's a millennial thing.
Oh, interesting.
It's not like I feel weird about anything from an animal. It doesn't.
It's coconut milk. It's been coconut milk forever and ever. So maybe that's why. It's a nut. It's,
They have cashew milk too. They got all sorts of stuff now.
Oat milk.
Yeah, oat milk, yeah.
What's yours?
So morning is black coffee,
Yeah.
strong black coffee.
Yeah.
It's just,
There
and
you go.
then
All right, the three of us have that in common.
Yes,
Yep.
and then there's an afternoon window,
Okay.
3 to 5, 3 to 6. And actually I fudged and had it on the way here, which is a little early for my window, but so if I'm talking a whole lot, which I know I am, that might be why. But I had a cortado, which is it's not a cortadito, which is sweeter. This doesn't have anything
What's
sweet
a
in it.
cortado?
Oh, well, so there's a latte, a lot of milk.
Okay.
Cappuccino, not so much milk. Cortado, less milk. So it's the same amount of espresso, but it packs a stronger punch. So, and I, it's my thing.
Can you get a cortado at Refuge Coffee Company? I'm sure you can.
Can you ever?
Right? Yeah.
In fact, not to go into this at all, and he is fine, so you'll be concerned. But my husband had a episode of cardiac arrest, which is somehow related to the treatment he had for cancer all those years ago.
Sure.
Whatever. So that happened in March. So it was at the beginning, and we were closed, but we still had our drive-through open. And my daughter-in-law arranged for a cortado to be delivered to my front door.
Nice.
Every afternoon.
Oh my.
And one of our employees, Ahmed, would often do it on Sunday, even though we were closed. He'd be like, well, I'm already up there. I'm just going to make it for you. And he'd drop it off.
That's cool.
So, yes, I love cortados.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's the only time I'll put milk in
David, we're getting cortados after this?
Yeah, you need
We might need to.
See, I
that
was
actually
gonna bring
sounds
you
really
something,
good.
but I don't. It doesn't. With the air and the temperature,
it's not the same. Yeah, you want that fresh.
Long
Yeah.
drive. It would have not been
do either
impressive.
of you have iced or cold brew or any of that?
I'll enjoy it sometimes.
We have
I
cold brew
only
and
ha-
we have nitro.
Do you drink cold coffee? I've never had cold coffee. I like it hot.
Have you ever tried it?
A sip now and then, it just...
I can pretty much do hot coffee whenever.
Yeah.
Me too.
But sometimes it's just like, if I'm going to be outside, I need my coffee no matter what. So
Yeah.
if I'm meeting somebody outside, I still need my coffee.
Yes.
So if it's, if it's 90 degrees outside, I might do the ice, but
I was in
Same thing
Kenya
black.
a few years ago, and I literally had a water bottle, and I would just put the instant in there in the afternoon because I realized that afternoon, and they were long days.
Yeah.
I
don't think I've ever done instant coffee.
Oh, well, instance, we're actually doing our barista training is now part of it is through the Specialty Coffee Association. It is intense.
Yeah.
And so we did a thing where we did some comparisons, and the instructor asked everybody, which was their favorite. And I was like, please don't say instant. Please don't say. None of them like the instant. But
That's
sometimes
funny.
you got to do what you got to do, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You need coffee.
I think, go ahead.
No, go.
We've sort of learned, and, Dan and I host this podcast for people to hear other people's stories of being a good Samaritan. And I mean, to hear Southwestern Theological Seminary, Dallas, Texas trained Baptist preacher and his wife are in Clarkston, Georgia, serving refugees and creating community and living out the gospel. That fits this podcast so well, because the likelihood that the Samaritan would be the hero of the story, the hero of the parable, versus the priest or the Levite who walked the road and passed by, it's just such a great picture, Kitti. And I'm just wondering if you can help all of us along. I shouldn't say our listeners, because Dan and I are learning as well. But one of the constant themes that we have heard throughout, whether it is racial issues in this country, even the political divide is so nasty, right? And relationships are coming undone because we might sort of view the world through one political lens or the other. Whether it's issues of orphans, foster care, whether it's cross religions. So we had Dr. Ray Norman from World Vision on, Dan and I's own experience in Ethiopia with the Interfaith Council. It sure seems that creating relationships is a component. Maybe I won't say the component, but I'm going to ask you the question. You're a networker by DNA, by personality, by your spiritual gifts. It sure seems to me that if we had broader relationships outside the Christian bubble, like you said, and maybe that is one of the downsides of just church, is an enclosure of our relationships and our experiences. Talk about the importance of relationships at Refuge Coffee Company, and where would you put relationships in this mass equation of how do we get Christians to be better Good Samaritans?
Gosh, such a good question. My mind has gone a ping pong ball and a dryer? Let me think for a second, because there's so many good ways to answer that question. And I think it's a good question for others to think about and me to think about. And I have to say, I am often, when I look at the Good Samaritan story, I relate to the Pharisee and the priest, so I think I always laugh that people think we moved to Clarkston and it was a hardship. It was not. It was a joy. And it wasn't like, oh, this is, gritting my teeth joy. It was like, I can't think of a day I haven't loved living there. So yeah, but yeah, I think relationships are important. We all do relationships a little differently. Some of us broadly, like some of us more, I just have a few close people.
Yeah.
And we all have barriers to relationships in our own souls and in our own, like where we live and work. So, but I think it's important. And I would say, what I used to say is, oh, you don't have to move like Bill and I did. And I don't think you have to move zip codes necessarily. In fact, that's all. That'd be terrible if everybody came to Clarkston. Then we'd have all kinds of issues.
Dan just got a new house, so
in Clarkston?
he's a newer homeowner, so he has to stay put.
Move. Yes, yeah. You let that house build up some value, right? Yeah, but congratulations anyway. But I do think you have to move. Like you have to. Yeah, there has to be motion, And so I think. And here's the other thing, and this is taking it away from relationships, but so two things. These are totally unrelated, but I just want to say them. So one is that one of the things I love about Refuge is that it is, to me, it feels like a first date place. Like, if you want to get to know somebody, but you're not really sure and you're insecure about yourself and about the person. This is someone who hasn't dated in 42 years other than my husband, so that's different. But it seems to me that you do something, you don't go out to dinner and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You maybe grab a coffee. There's
a level of conversation and connection that happen in that setting.
And a lot can happen in that setting. So I feel like we provide this space where you can put your toe in the water and then just see what seems right and let the Holy Spirit lead you and let the Scripture lead you and take some time to think all of these things through. Last Saturday, our second son left for a deployment. So he and his wife and 3 kids stopped by our house on the way to the airport. I had been grieving for weeks. Like I sort of pre-grieve anyway, more than once it's here, I'm like, got it, But when they left, I was just feeling super sad. Didn't really feel like being sad. And my husband had some things planned and I was at loose ends, but not ready to I wasn't going to sit there and sit in it at the moment. And so I was like, I'm going to walk up to Refuge. So I walked up to Refuge. I ended up being there 4 hours.
Oh my gosh.
I met 3 new people from 3 different countries. I saw old friends. I got to just have that feeling that we have there, which is this, everybody matters, everybody,
good.
It all tastes and smells good. And, all the music is from other countries. And I got to just do that. And I was like, people talk about starting Refuge as if it's this really altruistic thing, but it's really selfish. Like I did it for me because we had this wild and crazy home and then our children left and I love being with just my husband and he's quiet and it's a great quiet place. And at this stage of life, I need a quiet place.
Yeah.
But I've replaced that wild and crazy, fun, wonderful, happy place with something. And I think that's how God leads us, right? I love this phrase, and I'm trying to remember who we heard it from, but it's an obvious thing that my job is to be to others who God is to me. Well, if God is a refuge for me, and if he's a place of joy, if he's all these things to me, then my job is not to just sit in that and enjoy it, but it's to be those things to other people. So I think that's where you figure some of that out. But I think what brings a new level to it is if you think about who you're doing that with and where.
Yeah.
You could say that and do a really good job of being kind and loving and forgiving and caring with all the people who are just like you. And I think what we have to think about is like, Lord, but what would help me do that in a way that is more reflective of your love for the whole world, not just my little world.
That's good. Well, let's transition to forward from here. So you kind of rattled off the scope of Refuge. It started with a single truck. Is that how it started? You have a catering business now. You have shops. I mean, it has grown. What do you think is in the future for Refuge Coffee Company?
Wow. You know what I love right now is I feel like we have this whole team of dreamers who, I love dreaming, but I only have this much capacity, and as I get older, I have less. And I'm watching this team, just the sky's the limit. But they're also wise, and they're not, I think, a function of privilege is momentum, and they're good at slowing down and pausing and being careful, but so that we do things without like trampling over people with our privilege. But we're already in talks about another shop, and what growth means is more jobs, right?
Yeah.
It's more people that we get to interact with for a full year. So I think the shops, we're actually talking a little about a podcast. Who knows if that'll happen? That's kind of just stuff that's out there.
Good.
But I do hope that Refuge, even as a brand, can be impactful in a greater way in the future. But who knows?
That's awesome.
How can folks get engaged with Refuge?
Good question. Thank you. Well, we have a website. refugecoffeeco.com. We send out a newsletter, an email newsletter once a week, every once in a while, a little more often, but usually not. And we're on social media, mainly Instagram and Facebook. It's Refuge Coffee Co. If you do Refuge Coffee, it's a coffee shop in Fairhope, Alabama. They look super cool, but it's not us.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say just start there. If you ask for the emails, then you'll get ways to be engaged. And I would say, obviously we're a 501c3, so donating to us.
You can donate?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And we pay a living wage. So we feel like that's an important part of what we do. I was going to say something else. Oh, we have this catering business this is Ahmed Al-Zucani, our general manager. When COVID hit, catering just went from huge
to
to
events
zero.
To cater, right?
Yeah. Right. And so Ahmed's idea was, what if we went to people's neighborhoods? And we usually charge a minimum, and we didn't. And we did 400 neighborhood visits. People would just call us and say, come set up in this cul-de-sac, come do that.
Yeah.
So now if you have a business or the capacity to even have us at a small party or something, get us to come. I think it's worth it. The coffee's really, really good. The service is even better. And it's super mission related.
Awesome. Other than more grandchildren, what's on the horizon for you personally?
Oh, gosh. I am not 100% sure. There's some things out there in the works, and I tend to tell things before they're really ready to be told. So I should probably not. But they're just some fun. I am in a position now where I am 2 or 3 steps removed from a lot of our operations, which I wasn't the first 3 or 4 years. So that has been been good. And I don't mind letting go of that, control. I just like to be in it, you know? And so I'm in it enough, but there are people way better than me running our events and doing our operations. So, and I just get to hang out with them. So I do have more time to write and more time to speak and more time to just, like you talked about, shaking the church. I just feel like kind of called to do that. So great. I think there's some ways to do that, but who knows? 2021 is going to be interesting, right?
Yeah.
None of us know.
Yeah.
So we shall see. Yes.
Well, that is awesome. Well, I have to confess, we tried to get Ted Terry to come on the podcast.
He wouldn't do it, or he just
I think we missed him in transition. So for our listeners, Ted Terry was the mayor of Clarkston, and I think he might have other political aspirations.
He's the DeKalb County commissioner.
Yeah, so he ran for DeKalb County the commissioner's office.
He just won in a runoff.
So, but I'm glad we got you to tell the story of Clarkston and what people in the church can maybe do more. I love this concept of move, right? Like that's a great call to action. Like just move. Yeah. And not necessarily move your house like you all did, but move in the direction of things you don't understand, things you don't see every day, people you don't know about, like move in that direction. I think that's what Jesus called us to do, was to just, the Samaritan was the hero of the story, and he met the woman at the well, and he told Paul that, the Gentiles were going to hear the gospel and move. Like that's what's going to make us better as the hands and feet of Christ, I think.
Wrong.
Yeah.
Like don't not move just because you could get it wrong. Because if I could tell you how many mistakes I've made and we have made, and I have to make a phone call this afternoon because of a mistake, and I know that the people will be very gracious, but I really hate it, but I think it's just worth it to where you're just going to make mistakes, and that's okay too.
That's it. Yeah, for sure.
Well, Kitti, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah,
thank
awesome
you.
podcast. Really awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Our pleasure.
So we're going to have to get some Refuge coffee.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try what was it again?
Cortado.
A cortado.
Yeah.
Sounds strong. I think you're going to like it. You'll probably like it. It's strong. You'll like it.
Yeah, that's fine. Espresso with a little bit of milk.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, a little bit of the steamed milk. Yeah.
Well, we are so thankful that you joined us today, Kitti. This has been a real treat, and give our best to your husband, the wise one, Chief. And gosh, we'll be praying for your children and your grandchildren and the business. And this just seems like such a great gift for you as I forget what your Enneagram was, but
7. 7. Yeah.
7. It just
7
seems
with a
like
7
you're
wing.
doing great work. So,
I'm just going to say thank you. Thanks.
Awesome.
Thank you guys for great questions and
Refuge.
Time.
What's the website again?
Refuge Coffee Co.
Refuge Coffee Co. All of our listeners go there, and you will get great stories, because you can probably tell, I was poking around the website quite a bit, and you've been a blogger, and I mean, there's great content there, not just information about the business. There's great stories, your employees. That might be a first step for people to move if you want to just learn more about the plight of refugees and asylum seekers and immigrants in this country. Like, you can go to your website and get really good stories and a really good perspective. It's a good move.
Thanks for that. I hope so. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Well, guys, I'm Dan Riveros here with my co-host
David Hendrickson.
On Walking Through Samaria, we had Kitti Murray with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good one.
That's it, everybody. We'll talk to you next time on the Walking Through Samaria podcast.
See ya.
Take it easy.
For more content like this, visit us at givingcompany.com. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Walking Through Samaria.